I remember going through multiple phases in my Christian life where I loved to learn. I was consumed with learning new things about new topics. Now, as noble and as good as endeavor as that sounds, and it certainly can be, my problem was twofold. I was not absorbing or implementing even a fraction of what I was learning. And second, I began to really look down upon hearing things that I had previously learned as thinking they were unnecessary. I believe that we will discover one of our weapons for overcoming temptation is this. So much of our faith journey is not just about learning new things, but it's about being reminded of things we already know to be true, and therefore it going from an intellectual proposition to a heartfelt reality. And as we continue to look at how we protect our hearts to overcome temptation, we're going to dive into the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 11. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So in this verse, we read, they overcame him. And the him is referring to Satan. They overcame Satan by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Well, one of the means by which we fall prey to temptation is through accusation and condemnation. Right? This is one of Satan's primary weapons. Now, sometimes that accusation comes through our minds, sometimes it comes through others. But whatever the case is, the accusations in the moment can feel devastating, and therefore it can leave us wide open and vulnerable to temptation. So let's just think about that phrase. They overcame Satan by the blood of the Lamb. Now, if you're like me and you didn't grow up in church, that might seem like a rather strange phrase. But it simply means this. The Bible teaches that the primary thing wrong with this world is what is called sin. We each have a nature that desires things contrary to God. And since God is just, he couldn't just ignore our sin. But since he is loving, he also made a way for Christ to fulfill that justice so we didn't have to on our own. Now, many of us intellectually know this to be true, that Christ died for our sins. But remember, not everything that we learn is necessarily practically implemented into our lives. And therefore, the reality of being free from accusation might be an intellectual truth that we've heard, but it isn't necessarily a heartfelt reality for us. When Jesus was on the cross, he uttered the phrase, "It is finished." However, many of us, without realizing it, have turned that phrase into a question. Instead of receiving it as, "It is finished," we read it as, "Is it finished?" Now, the second part of that verse says they overcame Satan by the word of their testimony. Now, we are people that desperately need encouragement. We need reminders of our freedom from accusation. Otherwise, temptation will wreak havoc in our lives. And that's why it's so important to share the areas that Christ has set us free. It reminds us and it reminds others. Think about it. Even in a court of law, there is something called double jeopardy, where the person is not tried for the same crime twice. Now, if that's true in a court of law, how much more is it true for something that Christ has paid for on our behalf? So I want to leave you with this question. Who is someone that you can share your testimony with as a means of encouragement to them and a reminder to you of the areas that you have been set free from accusation?